If you are already subscribed, welcome back, my darling. And if you have not yet subscribed, subscribe. 62% of you all do not subscribe, and that hurts my feelings, so subscribe. So just to get right on into it, today's documentary, number one, is going to be a two-parter. So part one is today's, this makeup look right here, and part two will be up next Friday. Just for my mental sanity, I'm going to be uploading beauty and documentary once a week. It's just a lot. It can be very dark. So yeah, my new uploading schedule will be on the screen right now, so you can see when I upload and what I upload on each day. But yeah, today is going to be a two-part episode. So this is part one. So you will be getting two different makeup tutorials with this episode here. But this one was one that I had no intentions of ever breaking down. But ever since I started Beauty and Documentary Breakdown, this is the only documentary that has just been overwhelmingly recommended, like one that you guys just really wanted me to see. And of course, on social media, I ran a poll. So of course, if you don't follow me on social media, it's all linked down below. I asked you guys, what is one documentary that you all want to see? And 15 of you all told me this one. So here we are. This is the trials of Gabriel Fernandez. I watched this when it first came out, and it was really hard watch. And of course, I watched it again just to make sure that I could write everything down in, chronological order, so it all made sense for you guys. And it was hard to do that. Very hard to write it down on paper. So there's going to be a warning in this video. If you already watched the warning that I pre-did on my social media yesterday, then there'll be a timestamp on the screen for you to skip ahead and go ahead and watch the breakdown. However, if you have not watched the warning, please watch the warning. This one is very intense. And this warning only pertains to part one. There will be a whole separate warning for part two, but this only pertains to part one. So let's get into today's warning. But don't forget, there will be a secret emoji in this video. Please comment it down below for extra entries into my 100 subscriber giveaway. So all you have to do to enter into that giveaway is be subscribed and do the secret emoji. And y'all, we are getting very close. So be sure that you do comment the secret emoji. Let's get into today's warning. Warning, today's video is going to contain very descriptive details and just description in general of child abuse and child neglect. This one is a very hard one. It's a hard one to watch the documentary, but it's real hard for me to write it down, and it's going to be hard probably for some to listen to. So please, if anything like that is triggering for you, abuse in general or neglect, if anything like that is triggering for you or a hard, sensitive subject, please do not watch this video. We're also going to be talking about the description of a crime that involves a child. So we're going to be talking about wounds on a child. We're going to be talking about things like that. So if anything like this is uncomfortable, sensitive, hard for you in any way, please click out of the video now. You're not going to hurt my feelings at all. I pinky promise I'm going to love you regardless anyways. There'll be videos up here in the cards for you to go watch instead of this one that's more lighthearted and might be easier for you to watch. Today's video is only for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is extremely advised. All right, you guys, so just a little bit about Gabriel Fernandez. Gabriel Fernandez was an 8-year-old little boy in the Los Angeles, Palmdale area of California. He had only been living with his mother, Pearl Fernandez, and her boyfriend, Azaro Aguero, for 6 months before he was murdered by torture. So again, this is just another warning. We are going to be talking about child abuse, child torture, child neglect. So this is your final warning to click out. This is going to be the documentary has to do with what led up to Gabriel's murder, after the murder, the trial, what happened with the trial, and today is part one. So this is probably going to be one of two parts. There may be 3. I don't know how long the next one will take me, but we're definitely doing 2 parts. But that is what this documentary is about. Down in the description box, there will be a link for you to go to Netflix and to watch this documentary. If you have not watched it yet, I highly recommend that you watch the documentary before the breakdown. I cannot discuss every single detail of the documentary. We'd be here forever. So please go watch the documentary first. Again, I will have it linked down below as always. In all of these documentary breakdowns, I always have the link for Netflix down below. So, and as usual, all the makeup that is used in this tutorial right here will be right down below. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into Beauty and Documentary, Episode 8, Part 1, The Trials of Gabriel Fernandez, where we're going to break down that documentary and this makeup tutorial right here. Let's get started. May 24th, 2013. There is a 911 call placed in California, right outside of LA. Matter of fact, it's Palmdale, California. And there is a woman on the other end, Pearl Fernandez, and she says, quote, yes, I would like to, my son is not breathing, end quote. The 911 operator then says, okay, well, I need to get you transferred over to like the fire department and EMS. Hold, do not hang up. When the EMS fire department, it gets back on the phone, now Azaro Aguirre, we're going to call him Azaro, says, quote, oh my God, my son is not breathing, end quote. The EMS people, they're like, okay, are you doing compressions? Are you doing CPR? He says, yes, I've been doing compressions. And they're like, okay, well, if he's not breathing, you need to be giving him air. So you need to be doing CPR. The very next scene, they show you Antelope Valley Hospital. And you can hear in the background, emergency bay nurse Christine Estes. She's an RN. She's talking in the background. She said that all they knew up until this point is that there was a child coming in with severe trauma and that the situation was weird. It didn't make sense. She also said that they knew that this was a code 3. So they're coming in fast. They're coming in right now. They also play like the EMT drivers corresponding with police, asking them to block intersections. Like this is a severe emergency, like this is bad. Like Christine had stated already, they knew this was a fishy situation. EMT had already let them know. Things were not adding up. Things did not make sense. She said that it was an all-hand-on-deck situation. They had an ER doctor, a trauma surgeon, a respiratory therapist. They were OR ready. They were ready for whatever was about to take place. They also knew that the patient coming in was an 8-year-old little boy by the name of Gabriel Fernandez. Now, another thing that EMS had a lot of trouble with on the way to getting Gabriel to the hospital was his pulse. His pulse would go and come back and go and come back. But upon arrival to the hospital, EMS had gotten his pulse back. Now, Christine says immediately upon them arriving with Gabriel that it was chaos. You know, EMS is yelling out, you know, everything going on with him. You know, you've got all these doctors running around. And so they eventually go ahead and feel for a pulse just to make sure that it's still there. And they then realize that Gabriel's pulse is yet gone again. They do go ahead and get his pulse back yet again with cardiac medication, which does help get your heart rate back. They then realize that Gabriel is extremely, extremely cold. So they start doing like heat compressions and different things to keep him warm. Of course, they realize, you know, because of the trauma that he has had a lot of blood loss. So at this point, they are, you know, giving him blood and heat compressions and different things. And then they show a scene of them putting him in a CT scanner because of all of his wounds. And they lose his pulse again. They have to pull him out, get him back, put him back in the CT scanner. So it was just an ongoing battle, just alone keeping his heart rate. So Christine then describes what an ambulance bay nurse is. So basically, her job is to, while doctors and surgeons are like yelling out, okay, We've got a cut here and a scrape here, and we're going to do this, this, and this. She writes all of those issues down. Everything going on, she writes it down. Christine says that immediately she's in awe. Her jaw has dropped because of all of the things that they're yelling out that's wrong with this little 8-year-old little boy. Just to name a few, one, he had a depressed skull fracture. Basically what that means, so if you were to feel your skull right now, you are going to feel solid skull. So it's going to be hard. It's going to be solid. When they felt Gabriel's skull, she described it as Rice Krispies. That's what this poor little baby's head felt like, was Rice Krispies. His throat was burned, and she described it as like somebody had burnt like all the way around his neck. So his entire neck was burnt. There was bruising and cuts all over his face. Both of his eyes were black. And she said there were more cuts and just abrasions everywhere, every inch of his body. She said if you looked at one part of his body, you would realize there's more wounds. You would look at another part of his body, and then you found more, like it just never stopped. It just kept going. There was more and more and more. She also mentions this very odd cut that's right above his privates. She also says that there was abrasions on the top of his feet, like what you might get from being dragged. There was also ligature marks on his ankles, like what you might get from being tied up, bound. She said, quote, every part of his body, there was just like something, end quote. She said that, I mean, just everywhere that they would look, there would be something else. And she said that, you know, she had seen some things, but like the notations on this, everything that she was writing down, she was like, it was just like almost impossible to keep up with everything. There was just so much wrong with this little boy. He also had a bullet in his lung by a BB gun, a bullet in his groin by a BB gun. He had cigarette marks all over his body, which would be consistent with someone putting out cigarettes all over his body. And she also mentioned like the stages of the bruisings and marks all over him. She said there would be a mark that was, you know, in the healing process, but you would have like 5 brand new bruises and marks. She said, so you would have some healing, some that were fresh and brand new, and some that were like in between healing and new. They were everywhere, and they were in all different stages. So this had been happening over a period of time. This was not like what they said. And keep in mind, you guys, on the 911 call, they say that, oh, he was wrestling with a brother. Oh, they were running around in the living room and he fell. Oh, he was in the shower and he fell. Like there were so many different stories mentioned in the documentary that from the get-go, I mean, obviously none of these things were true. She said that she can remember the very first child that she ever had to give like CPR to. She'll never forget that child. She'll always remember that. And she said it, while it was horrible, it was nothing like this. She said that she will remember what Gabriel looked like. She'll remember his name. And she'll remember almost everything about him forever. Forever. And I'm sure I couldn't even imagine. She was just asking herself, like, how did this happen? How did nobody report this? Like, how could something this brutal happen to this little boy? And of course, she was very emotional at this point and started talking about the 911 call and how Pearl had said again that he had slipped in the bathtub. So later, the children's hospital would take Gabriel. And of course, that is where Gabriel would later pass away. He was on life support, and the doctors just told the family, like, he's not going to make it. Christine also says, quote, this kid's never known love, end quote. And she said that this case has followed her ever since, and she's thought about Gabriel every day. She says she thinks about him every single day. So at this point, they introduce you to someone with the LA Times, Garrett Theroff, and he explains how the LA Times keeps up with all of the deaths in LA, every one of them going in and out. But if you are familiar with LA, then you know that there are many, many deaths in LA. But he talks about how Gabriel's case just stuck out like a sore thumb. He was so young, and word about his death just was spreading like wildfire. At this point, this is also when we find out that Gabriel, originally after he was born, went with his uncle and his uncle's life partner and was there until he was 3, almost 4 years old. Then he went to live with his grandparents. He had only been living with his mother, Pearl, and her boyfriend, Azaro, for 6 months. All of this happened within a 6-month period. So what got this case to be different, because there's also someone who works with the LA Times that's in the documentary. He says that murders come in all the time. It's not, unfortunately, an odd or peculiar thing in LA. It just happens way too often. He said what made this one different was when the Board of Supervisors took up. So the Board of Supervisors is basically the law in LA. Like, they control everything, and their main and primary goal is the protection of children. So when the Board of Supervisors picked up this case and started talking about it, and buzz started happening with the Board of Supervisors, this is when it got put in the paper. And this is when people really started talking about Gabriel and wanting to know what happened and how this happened. Also, with the Board of Supervisors, another thing that makes them like very unique is that once they get voted in, they're hardly ever voted out. Here's another thing, you guys. Shortly after Gabriel died, news got out that Child and Family Protective Services had been out to the home to check up on Gabriel and the safety of Gabriel several times, and nothing had happened. This is when shit hit the fan. So the LA Times finds a source to speak, because Garrett from the LA Times, he said that he knew that if he could find somebody to speak with somewhere in Child Protective Services, someone who worked in that realm, that they could really make something happen with this case, that this would be a turning point. And he was correct. They found somebody to speak. He spoke in the documentary. They didn't show his face, obviously, and they didn't tell his name, because obviously if he shares this information, not only could he lose his job, but he could also go under criminal charges as well. So, I mean, obviously he's not going to say, want everybody to know who he is and, who he works for and all that. So they go to a hotel and meet up with this person who works somewhere within Child Protective Services. He has access to documents anyways. And he tells them, yes, I seen this document. And they're like, okay, well, what did you see on this document? And he said, well, I seen that there were several people, not just one. There were several CPS workers that were involved with the Gabriel Fernandez case. Several, not just one. There was not just one CPS worker that went out to check on this child, y'all. There were several. Not only that, but sheriffs had been out to the home. A teacher had called many times. This was about to be really bad for Child Protective Services. He also said that the documents he found showed like a timeline and an outline of what would come to fruition with Gabriel Fernandez. All of these findings, all of these reportings, all of the recordings, everything that they had was a timeline of when Pearl Fernandez got Gabriel and when Gabriel Fernandez was murdered. So on May 31st, 2013, not long after Gabriel's murder, it's put in the paper. It's in the LA Times, what is going on. And you all, LA goes under a protest. People are absolutely, without a doubt, furious. Also, you guys, I'm going to have in the description box 2 different things. I'm going to have where you can donate to the Gabriel Fernandez Foundation. And also, I'm going to have a link to where you can sign a petition for these social workers to be tried again. All of their charges were dropped. I hate to go ahead and spoiler alert this, but all of their charges would be dropped, every single one of them. So there is a petition below where you can re-sign that. But we'll get more into the CPS workers here in a minute. So this is where justice for Gabriel starts. They're doing protests outside of CPS in LA. They're doing it everywhere. I mean, people are pissed. People are pissed, and people want to know the truth now. So this is where they introduce you to Jackie Lacey. She is the LA district attorney at the district attorney's office. And she says immediately that something could have been done. There were opportunities for something to be done. There were opportunities for something to happen with this whole situation, and nothing was done. Time and time again, they were warned, and nothing was ever done. She said the first question was, is this a death penalty case? And she said, after you look at how Gabriel was tortured, how long Gabriel was tortured for, everything that this child was put through, yes, it was a death penalty case. So they tried for death penalty. They also show a news clipping with Jackie Lacey and why that she decided to charge the social workers that went out to check on Gabriel. And she said, quote, "We believe these social workers were criminally negligent and performed their legal duties with willful disregard for Gabriel's well-being. They should be held responsible for their actions," end quote. So there were 4 social workers with CPS that were involved specifically in Gabriel Fernandez's case that went to the home, saw Gabriel in the shape that he was in, and did nothing. Stephanie Rodriguez, Patricia Clement, Kevin Baum, and Gregory Merritt. All 4 of these were up on felony charges. So at this point, you were introduced to, I hope I don't pronounce this wrong, Jonathan Hatami. He was the prosecutor with the district attorney's office, and he was just an incredible lawyer. And just to see like how far he took it to make sure that justice was given to Gabriel throughout this documentary was incredible. I was just very impressed with him. He's a family man. He has children. His wife is a police officer. Matter of fact, when they introduce his wife, and they start talking about her being a police officer and everything, which we'll get more into that into part 2, but there's a whole situation with his wife and her being a police officer, and because, as I said, officers were going out to the home and nobody did anything. We'll get more into what all kind of happened with his wife. We'll get into that later. So this is where Jonathan takes the documentary filmers to the home where Gabriel would have been murdered, tortured for months and months, and also shows you Gabriel's tree. So there is a tree outside of the home. It's an apartment complex, but it's outside of the home where people have like made a memorial. They have a picture of Gabriel on his birthday and Christmas. Like they put up a tree at Christmas, and on his birthday they put balloons and, you know, little teddy bears and things like that. It's just a very, like I said, guys, this is just a very emotional documentary. And the further that you get into it and the more that you learn, just the harder and harder it gets. As EMS get on the stand, so they do show like clips of the trial throughout the documentary. And mind you, Pearl and Azaro are being tried separately because Pearl stated that she was educationally like inherent, so they ended up trying them separately. And Azaro's trial is first, and so the EMS get on the stand, the EMS workers that went out, and they say that this is something that they will never ever forget. They also talk about when they arrived, the behavior that they both were. They were very argumentative and very standoffish. They also talk about 2 things that they noticed. They noticed these bats that looked bloody, and there was literally blood all over the place. And remember, In the beginning, I told you that Azaro said that he was giving Gabriel CPR. Well, Gabriel was covered in blood, covered from head to toe in blood. I'll obviously not be sharing the picture when he arrived to the hospital, but they show the picture at this point. There's just no way you could have been giving this child CPR and not got blood on you. There's just no way. And Azaro had none, not one little droplet of blood. The prosecutor talks about how the DNA analyst, when they go to the scene, they bring a fresh roll of red arrow tape so that they can mark throughout the home or area, wherever they are, everywhere that she found blood. Y'all, there was so much blood in the home that she ran out of the red arrow tape and had to go to yellow. So at this point, this is when you are introduced to the cabinet. I'll have a picture of the cabinet or cupboard or cubby on the screen right now. It's referenced to all of those things, either a cubby, a cabinet, or a cubby, a cabinet, or whatever. It's on the screen right now. There was blood found on this, and it would be found later that this would be where Gabriel spent most of his time. They would bound this poor child up, tie him up, and lock him in this cupboard. So after they show you the cabinet or the cupboard, they then talk about the 9th floor at the LA courthouse and how the trials that have been and the cases that have been on the 9th floor are some of the most world-renowned, like they've been the most talked about trials ever. You've got the O.J. Simpson trial. You've got the Grim Reaper trial. You've got the doctor that over Michael Jackson, his trial was there. There's been some serious trials in this courtroom. But the prosecutor says that the most notorious in his eyes was the Gabriel case because it just had so much disturbing evidence and so much just disturbing things in general that happened to this poor child. So they decided, like I said earlier, Azaro and Pearl are going to have their trials separately, and then after their trials, that is when the CPS workers are going to have their trial. So then you also meet Scott Yang. He is also a prosecutor on the case. So basically, they are going at it together. They are going to present this case to the jurors together. And they had known each other for a while. They were very familiar with each other. They had worked on trials with each other before. And Jonathan said that he handpicked Scott Yang to basically be on this case with him because they worked together so well and he knew that he would be the right fit to work with him. Then they have a scene where it's the detective, the main detective on the case, Detective Elliot Urib, I hope I'm pronouncing that somewhere right. And it is the interrogation between himself and Azaro. And he's talking to Azaro and he's like, yeah, but you know, something happened. You got mad. And Azaro basically, admits that he is at like a level 20 of anger right then when he's asking him these questions and that, yeah, he has fits of anger, but he didn't lose it on Gabriel, nothing like that. So it's like in the background, there was just no sympathy shown, y'all, the whole time. There's just no sympathy shown throughout the entire documentary. None. Not from him, not from Pearl, as if they didn't even care about this child. And what makes it even crazier is that the police were called, the sheriff was called to the home just days before Gabriel's murder. Days. I just don't understand how all of these people were called to the home and nobody stopped nothing. It's just insane. Now, when they started to dig all this information up, right, and they start to realize, that it wasn't only CPS. It wasn't only CPS. There was also a teacher of Gabriel's who called CPS many times, which we'll talk more about her here in a minute. but also that police officers and sheriffs were going to the home and nothing was being done. This just exposed something rotten. This exposed a rotten justice system when it comes to the protection of our children. And that's what's so disturbing here. This is the protection of a child, a baby. He was 8. He was in the 2nd grade. Oh my God. I just don't understand how this many people can be involved and nothing is done to help him. I mean, we're talking about a trial with over 1,200 exhibits. If you're not familiar with what an exhibit is, it is like, for instance, the blood evidence. There were 1,200 exhibits. Most cases have between 200 and 500. This had 1,200 exhibits and it involved an 8-year-old little innocent little child baby boy. So immediately going in, you see, so then they show the part of the bailiff announcing to the courtroom, you know, that this is going to be a very emotional court hearing, a very emotional court process, and that if anybody is to find themselves getting emotional, that they have to leave the courtroom and then they can come back when they start to feel better. In 2017, that is when eventually Azaro would be seeing himself in court. This is when opening statements start, and, you know, the opening statements are from what you can imagine. Basically, Jonathan is telling the court, the jurors, you know, what we've already explained. So we're going to discuss things that I haven't already told you guys from this point forward. So at this point, the new information that I haven't already told you guys is that at the time of Gabriel's death, of course, we've already discussed that he was 8 years old. But what I haven't told you guys is that he only weighed 59 pounds. My 6-year-old nephew weighs more than that. Also, it is important for me to go ahead and tell you guys now that Azaro said from the very beginning that his hands were clean, that he did not do anything. This was not him. And this led a lot of people to start to speculate that it all had to do with Pearl. Basically, that she was the Black Widow and she had him do all of her dirty bidding. That's what this led people to believe, but there's just too many evidence to the contrary. Someone goes and talks to Azaro in prison and sneaks in audio equipment. And they're talking in Spanish, okay? And, you know, it wasn't him and it was Pearl and he's not going down for this because he didn't do anything. And just keeps saying, you know, my hands are clean, my hands are clean, my hands are clean, whatever. So the defense, what are they saying? They're saying that there will be evidence that will show, you know, he's not going to come and say that Azaro did not torture Gabriel to death. He said that the evidence is going to show that that did happen. He did not kill Gabriel intentionally, that this happened in a fit of anger. So then the first people that they show on the stand are the EMS workers. And I found this just a little bit more emotional than just about anybody else other than the grandpa. I don't know why, but the grandpa just like hurt my heart. He was just so emotional. You could tell that he loved that little boy so much. But the EMS workers are saying, you know, we've never seen anything like this. This was absolutely petrifying. They also talk about how the way their body language and the way that Pearl and Azaro behaved when they arrived. They were telling the EMS workers that Gabriel was a liar and that he was gay. And why that would be even mentioned when your son is dying. But they were talking about how he was gay and, you know, if he wakes up, don't listen to anything he tells you because he's a liar. He's known to lie. Like just all this disgusting, disgusting shit. And these EMS people are like, this is weird. Like, why are you not like... And also the police were there. They talked to the police also on the stand at this point. And they asked this officer that was there at the time, of course, and He was like, I thought it was really weird. He was like, they didn't even ask to get in the ambulance. So the defense attorney is like, okay, so you're telling me that if he would have said, okay, let's save these questions for later, I want to get in the ambulance and ride with my son, you would have let him leave? And the police officer's like, he was free to go at any time. So they asked him and the EMS worker and the other ambulance driver, have you ever seen a parent stay behind while their child was in, not per se in this condition, but hurt at all? And one of the EMS drivers said something that stuck in my hand. He said, I've seen them fight their way in an ambulance before. And that is literally any parent. I'm not a parent, but if, say for instance, I had my nephew Hayden, okay? And say for instance, he fell or something, like knock on wood, God forbid, anything ever happened. But if something happened, I'm getting in that ambulance. Like, I don't care if me and you have to take this to the streets, but I'm getting in there. Sorry to tell you, brother, but I'm getting in the ambulance. Like the fact that they didn't want to go, but all they were concerned was to let them know that he was a liar and that he was also gay. Then after they, tell both of them, okay, well, you're being arrested because this is, there's something going on here. You're not telling us everything, and obviously Gabriel's condition. Gabriel was not breathing. They had to bring him back. You know what I'm saying? So, of course, they're going to jail. Do you want to know what Pearl was worried about and concerned about? Her other two children. Yes. So there's two other children involved that, as far as courts and everybody knows, they were never had any type of trauma like Gabriel got. Gabriel got, beat, from what we understand, daily. But the daughter, there has been evidence that Pearl hit her once, but nothing like I said, nothing like Gabriel got hit. First responders also talk about how they weren't upset. Like I said, Pearl wasn't concerned with Gabriel at all. Neither was Azaro. Pearl was concerned with her two other children, asking where they were, and her cats. Yes, you heard me right, my friends. Her cats, which the EMS driver says that they had to carry them out in crates. There were so many cats. This is when they also talk about the fact that they only let Gabriel wear dresses. Because like I said, they thought he was gay. And their reasoning for thinking Gabriel was gay was because he talked about how much he loved his uncle and his uncle's husband that raised him. They said he was gay because he talked about how much he loved them. I mean, these are just sick individuals. Made him wear dresses. They found in Gabriel's closet, the only clothes that were there for Gabriel to wear were two dresses. And they ended up finding the rest of Gabriel's clothes underneath the sink in a bag. This is when the prosecutor, Jonathan, he talks about why they didn't go after a hate crime in this. And he said, because that has to be proven without a reasonable doubt. And he said that his main concern and the main issue here was the abuse, was, the murder of Gabriel. So his main concern was to go after, first degree murder. He said, but this case is about murder. It is about abuse, but it's also a hate crime. Because they did think that Gabriel was gay. And they called him gay all the time. And matter of fact, they do talk about now how that is one of the last things that Gabriel would hear as he was being beat to death by Azaro. Is Azaro was yelling out, you're gay, you're gay, you're gay. Like, this is just the most disgusting shit ever. And like Jonathan says, the prosecutor, he's, talking to the documentary people then, and he's talking about how Azaro mentions to the, first responders that Gabriel's gay. He's like, well, what does that matter? What does that matter? Your child is dying. I mean, my child could want to wear a fruit basket on his or her head the rest of his or her life. And I would love them no matter what. Who cares? Who cares? So then they talk about the difference in the defense and what they're saying. Of course, they're saying that it was just, a fit of rage, just out of nowhere one time. And Jonathan, the prosecutor, he says there's a problem with that. There's a problem with that because there were people who were calling CPS and calling jails and the police months before of this abuse. So there's a problem with that. This wasn't a fit of rage. This is something that had been going on for months and months and months and months and months. And in 6 short months, they killed this innocent baby. Period. They also talk about the 911 call, and the defense was trying to say that the 911 call showed that Azaro was trying to do compressions, but like I said in the beginning, Azaro had no blood on him. Gabriel was covered in blood, so that right there debunks that theory then and there. I am going to have to read this part because it's big words and things, and I don't want to mess it up. But then they have the forensic radiologist on the stand, and he discusses these injuries that Gabriel has. He talks about this rib fracture that he has. And this rib fracture that he has is in a particular spot where there's nerve endings. And he talks about how every single time that Gabriel moves, even if it is a little bit, that it was causing Gabriel pain. So the prosecutor says, so you mean every time that Gabriel breathed, he would have been in pain? And the doctor said, well, yes, that's movement. Any movement at all, he would have been in serious pain, not just a little pain. This would have been serious, intense pain. And Gabriel had this specific injury right after he got there, right after he started living with his mother, after moving out of his grandparents. Then they have the very intelligent doctor who did the autopsy come on the stand, and he had been doing this for 30 plus years. And the first thing the prosecutor, Jonathan, asks him is, how long did it take you to do Gabriel's autopsy? And he said 2 days. And the prosecutor said, is that normal? And he said, no, absolutely not. And the prosecutor, Jonathan, says, well, why did it take you 2 days? And he says, they're all the injuries. It took me that long because of all his injuries. So they asked the guy, the doctor who did the autopsy. At this point, the prosecutor says, okay, well, what is the thymus gland? And he says, well, that is something on children at Gabriel's age that is right here. And at Gabriel's age should have been white. It should have been large. But Gabriel's was very, very small. He said it was barely there and barely visible. It wasn't white at all. He said it was literally barely there. And the prosecutor says, well, what would cause, that to happen? And the doctor says severe psychological stress that would happen over months. I mean, this child was just put through so much that he literally didn't even have a thymus gland. Then they asked him, what was the actual cause of death? And he said subdural hematoma caused by blunt force trauma. And he said that this death was caused by child abuse and was a homicide. So he did mark it as a homicide. Then introduce you to the DNA analyst that we discussed earlier with the red stickers that ran out and had to use yellow. They introduce you to her, and she talks about the bats. So there was actually more than one bat. There were 2. There was a wooden bat, and then there was a black ball bat. And she said that both of these bats were tested for blood, and that both of them tested positive to have the blood of Gabriel Fernandez both on them. So he had been being beaten with these ball bats. So to end off part 1, We're going to talk about the testimony of the forensic analyst that did go on stand. And he was talking about basically after someone passes away, a forensic analyst is going to analyze the inside of your body. So any fluids that you may have or anything like that. He stated that after reviewing Gabriel's body that he kept finding these gray particles in his body. He said after reviewing these particles several times, he was pretty sure what it was, but just to be 100%, he was going to do a comparison. So he was going to put side by side this gray particle that he found in Gabriel's stomach beside what he thought it was. Y'all, it was this, and it was kitty litter. They had been feeding this child kitty litter. And after closer examination in Gabriel's stomach, there was no fat cells. There was not even any food. The only thing in this poor baby's stomach was kitty litter. Okay, guys. So like I did mention earlier, this is going to be a 2-part episode. So episode 8, part 2 of the trials of Gabriel Fernandez will be uploaded next Friday. My new uploading schedule, which I've already announced on social media, will be on the screen right now. I'm only going to be doing beauty and documentary breakdown episodes once a week now. They're just really hard to do. They are very dark and it's just a lot on my psyche. So for me, I'm going to be doing it once a week and that will be on Fridays. So Friday is going to be beauty and documentary breakdown day. So next Friday, you will see part 2 to this. Please be on the lookout for that. Also, like I mentioned many times in this episode, I post all the time on social media and let you guys know spoiler alerts, just odds and ends. So please do go down to the description box and follow my social media. Also, don't forget there are going to be 2 links down there. 1 to support the Gabriel Fund and 2 to sign up petitions against these CPS workers that charges were also dropped. Do not forget that all the makeup used in this tutorial for this beauty look, so you're going to get 2 makeup looks with this documentary. So all the makeup used in today's tutorial will be linked down below. Also, don't forget the secret emoji that's been in this video. If you comment it down below, it will give you yourself an extra entry into my 100 subscriber giveaway. And I want all of you all to be a part of that. So be sure that you do comment the secret emoji and that you are subscribed, because I know 62% of y'all don't subscribe. Subscribe to me. Subscribe. Until next time. Bye.